Hello and welcome to Africa Today. I am Esther Mokwariola. In a world where terrorism has evolved into a phenomenon, recurrent events bear tales of how insurgents are a threat to global peace, national security and human existence, especially in parts of Africa. Now, Al-Shabaab, a Somalia-based Al-Qaeda affiliate fighting to impose strict Islamic law, recently carried out an attack in Kenya, saying it was in response to United States President Donald Trump's decision to recognize Jerusalem as Israel's capital. And so we ask, what are your thoughts on efforts aimed at tackling terrorism in Africa and across the world? You can join the conversation and share your thoughts with us on Twitter at TVC News NG. We take a report now, and Africa Today will be right back. Welcome.
At least one explosion and sustained gunfire had sent workers fleeing for their lives at an upscale hotel and office complex in Nairobi. A plume of smoke could be seen above the complex, and firefighters extinguished 3 burning cars at its entrance as armed security personnel headed inside. Other armed officers escorted shocked workers out, many with their hands up. Some workers climbed out of windows, and many say they had to leave colleagues behind, still huddled under their desks.
We were trying to move out when the first explosion happened. So by the time we reached the last entrance to come out, then the gunshots were being aimed at us. So we could not tell where they're coming from, who is shooting them. So we just retreated and went back to the offices. We started hiding. So some people got in the toilets, other people are still hiding in the stores, and many people are in the offices under the desks. There are so many people inside there.
Kenya's police chief, Joseph Boynet, says the assault is a suspected militant attack and the gunmen may still be at large.
And that we regret to inform that today at about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, a group of unknown armed assailants attacked the Dusit complex in what we suspect could be a terror attack. Security and emergency services responded quickly to the incident, and we immediately cordoned off the area, and the situation is being managed. And we've made evacuation of many persons in the complex, and the operation is still going on as we speak as of now.
Kenya has often been targeted by Al-Shabaab, who killed dozens of people in a shopping complex in 2013 and nearly 150 students at a university in 2015.
Yeah, we are going. We are going.
Well, from the moment the first shot was fired to when the first bomb was thrown and after the first life was lost, the eventual impact shows how terrorists have the potential to go beyond borders and the resilience to strike at will. Well, in Kenya, detectives say they have arrested 9 suspects in connection with an attack on the Nairobi hotel and office complex that killed 21 people. Now, joining me to look at efforts aimed at tackling terrorism in Africa and across the world is Onyekachi Adekoya, security consultant, and I have on phone Elias Mutuma, lawyer and political analyst in Kenya. Good to have you both on the program tonight. Now, let me begin with you, Onyekachi. Kenyans were panic-stricken, shocked, if not still in shock, still that when that thing happened. But when you first saw the news, what first came to mind?
First in the mind was this business as usual. Sadly, it was just business as usual. You must understand that Kenya has always been in the news for such attacks. And I think the first modern known terror attack in Kenya took place in about 1976, 1975. And since then, there's always been one excuse to attack Kenya. Kenya is always also bordered by Somalia. It's not also too far away from Yemen. And bordered by Uganda and not too far from Sudan. So Kenya sits in a bit of a hotbed just where the Western affiliation it has makes it attractive to Islamic extremists. So when I heard of the attack, it was just, there they go again.
So if you say it's business as usual, does it mean that they have nothing to do to save the situation?
Well, they can try, most especially when intelligence report this suggests. And again, it's important to note that Kenya was already on high alert since November last year.
Right.
They had intelligence report that Al-Shabaab will strike. They just didn't, they weren't sure where, when, or they knew the how, because the modus operandi was always there. They've stuck to the same pattern. The first bomb blast went off, shots rang out. You know, they did a bit of a retreat. They came back again, shot all through some time, you know, and the attack lasted and ended the next day.
Right.
So the modus operandi is clear. The intent is also there. The capability of Al-Shabaab is well known. They have a huge space in Somalia where they govern a lot of ungoverned spaces, you know, and they have where to recruit, access to land. They have also access to transnational organized crime. And so they are supplied, they have supply, they have logistics. Granted that they have been considerably weakened by American attacks, airstrikes. But this attack is just a statement for them. Now, I would like to say that my heart and prayers goes out to the families of those affected in the attack. But,
right.
you know, unlike Nigeria, Kenya seems to have a bit of a history with Al-Shabaab attacks. So it's a sad one, but
yeah, really
happens.
sad one. But let's quickly come to you now, Elias. From the response time we get, we understand that it was quite swift, even though lives were lost. What would you say aided the security operatives to, well, nip this in the bud or quickly end the operation?
Thank you so much. First, my heart goes to the victims, especially the families of the 21 people who are killed by Al-Shabaab. We are still grieving as a country, and we are hoping to overcome this. Kenya has been a soft target for Al-Shabaab, obviously because of its proximity to Somalia, and again, because of our active, military presence in Somalia. So we have always known that we are a target. And there has been a high alert, even on the streets. The ordinary Mwananchi or the common citizen knows that we are likely to be attacked. You find that even small children in our country know about Al-Shabaab, and they keep on asking about it. So we have not been sleeping, and I want to commend our security forces because unlike other incidences where we have lost bigger numbers of people, this time the number was considerably down. You remember last time we lost around 150 students in one night. That is during the Garissa University attack. 3 years ago, when we had an attack at Westgate Mall, we lost over 40 people again. So this is an improvement on our side. And I would attribute this to, number one, a multi-agency approach by all the security forces. Because after the Garissa attack, where we lost a lot of students, there was need for the government to go back on the drawing board and restructure its security in terms of combating Al-Shabaab. And there was a combination of all the forces, including KDF, that is Kenya Defense Forces, the army itself, including the elite general service unit, including the regular police. So they were all under one command, and it's like they were waiting to strike. So when information came out that Kenya is under attack, then it was very quick for them to assemble and try to neutralize the situation. And you'll agree with me that within a few hours, they had already neutralized the situation, killed all the Shabab. So I would attribute this to the multi-agency approach with all the security apparatus in Kenya.
All right, let's quickly go on a very quick break now. You're watching Africa Today. We'll have more discussions in just a moment. Stay with us. Welcome back. Well, the recent attack at Dusit D2 Hotel complex in Kenya was the first in Nairobi since the Westgate Mall attack in 2013. And 2 years later, 2015, another Al-Shabaab attack killed 148 people at a university in Garissa in eastern Kenya. Now, Onyekachi, according to Kenya's president, all the terrorists were eliminated in the operation. But even though, be that as it may, is what happened or is what we got to hear, how satisfied are you in Kenya's handling of this terror attack, and ensuring that such a situation doesn't happen again?
I would like to commend the Kenyan Armed Forces. You could see from their response that what immediately kicked in was second nature. They had trained, done a lot of life exercises and drills. They also had help from the international community in terms of their preparation and preparedness. So preparedness and preparation was very key. So that's why when the incident happened, you saw overwhelming response. It was swift, and kudos to the men who put themselves out and they did a good job. I'm not too optimistic that a second incident or a follow-up incident would not happen again. This is just because Al-Shabaab in Somalia is still strong. Somalia is a destabilized, if I use the word a bit mildly, Somalia has challenges, and Al-Shabaab controls massive territories. They have access to land, ease of recruitment. The way the first attack rang out, it was a suicide attack. Somebody blew off himself close to vehicles, the vehicles were burning, then that triggered the attack. So are the conditions there for another attack? Yes. Is Al-Shabaab still a threat? Yes. Is there an intention and clear intent to attack Kenya? Yes.
And so if there is a threat in that region, what are your thoughts on how they've been able to, contain this terrorist group, even though they know that they exist and they pose a threat not just to the country, but to the East African region?
I think that the Kenyan government is also not resting on its oars. They're doing a lot. They're working hand in hand with the Somalian government, with the American government. I think America has over 6,000, well over 6,000 of its forces stationed around Africa, also on counter-insurgency and counter-terrorism task. So I think they are already engaged in Somalia. Now, Al-Shabaab has been considerably weakened, but they have not been put out. Such an attack like this is just a statement. Let's forget what they said. Let's discount what they said, saying that the attack was just because President Donald Trump moved. They've always had a reason. Recall when you had the Entebbe operation, when Israel had to refuel in Kenya en route to Uganda, there was a response from Al-Shabaab attacking and saying there's always been one reason or the other. But let's look at the economic interest and the economic reason why Kenya would always appeal. There's massive and pervasive poverty within that region. When you look at Somalia, Sudan, and you look at Kenya with its Western connection and the Western appeal, Kenya to the terrorists and their criminal enterprise is the cash cow. That's where there is economic viability. That's where there is interest. That's where they can make a statement to the West. That's where they can show intent. So Kenya is attractive to them. So they would always come back to attack Kenya. It's not the first time. You can go back in time and see all the attacks that Kenya has had. So as to what the government can do, I think the government is doing what it needs to do. And perhaps the AU needs to put in a bit more interest in that region, knowing that if you allow Al-Shabaab, which is why America is taking a very aggressive posture, even engaging a bit more in Africa to nip Al-Qaeda in the Islamic Maghreb, as they call it.
Absolutely.
So you have Al-Qaeda, you have ISIS, you have the Lord's Resistance Army in Uganda, you have Al-Shabaab. So the tussle really is basically between Al-Qaeda and ISIS. So there's a pseudo tussle for influence, control of patronage going on between ISIS and Al-Qaeda.
Now, you mentioned something earlier. You mentioned about lone wolves.
Yes.
In subtle language.
Yes.
Radicals, free radicals who go about perpetrating these acts.
Yes.
Based on what they've been radicalized on. How do you think, such persons like that can be, or I say such cases can be handled so one can really identify, lone wolves or radicals who believe that they are carrying out a good deed, meanwhile it's something of evil?
So I think that borders on intelligence. But there are some reports also, without making any indictive statements, that perhaps some level of corruption makes such persons, allows them sometimes free movement between those areas where, controls to the borders are not too strict. So I think that the Americans and the Israelis, working with the Kenyans and working with other partners, are doing a lot. And if you notice, we've not had so much of these attacks. Before this attack took place, there was intelligence to the fact that it will happen. Thank God that there was response, and very good response. The numbers were contained and the terrorists eliminated. So I think what the government needs to do is to double its efforts, go back into this incident. They should learn what failed, applaud what worked, and perhaps enhance and reinforce some of the things that did work. But sadly, the issues of poverty, mass unemployment, desertification, control of resources,
Is that the cause of the rising wave of terrorist attacks, you mean?
Yes, in Africa. Let's not shy away from the fact that poverty, mismanagement, corruption, sometimes incompetence on the part of leadership are some of the conditions that causes some of these things to thrive. Because what then happens is that you have a lot of ungoverned spaces where people come in. Al-Shabaab in Somalia is collecting tax. They're government to themselves. And their objective is to have an Islamic republic in Somalia and to control the resources of the state of Somalia. So there's also economic interest there.
Right. Now, Elias, we understand that various multinational forces have been created to, nip this in the bud in terms of, tackling terrorist elements, not just in the West or in the West African region and the East, also in the Central. But would you say that these groups created to, handle these elements are gaining ground in defeating these terrorist elements, or they need to change their strategy altogether?
I think we're not getting it right, because we keep on using the same methods to combat terrorism, and terrorists are becoming wiser by the day, and they are, innovating new ways of doing terrorism. Not just in Kenya. We have seen in other places where they do simple acts which are very harmful. For example, just driving and ramming into a crowd, or just going into a school and shooting, because they know that these agencies are there, and they expect bombs to be made and then guns to be ferried to a certain area and blow it up. But then they have, improvised and become, they've mutated from one form to the other. That's, sort of hiding. So I think we are not doing what is right, and I think what needs to be tackled is the source and who is funding Al-Shabaab. If we are able to cut it from the bottom, then we will win this war. But unless that is happening, then we may not win this war. And the reason why I'm saying that is that, for example, in Kenya, people who were masterminders of this attack are fellow Kenyans. Initially we thought that they are foreigners, but we now discover that they come from our land. Children that went to school with us, and they have brothers here, they have sisters here. So it means that we are fighting a mindset, not just terrorism as a group. So if we have all these agencies fighting Al-Shabaab as a group, then we're losing it. And unless we go back and attack the mindset and cut it from where it begins.
And talking about fighting or attacking this mindset now, do you propose or suppose that de-radicalization is the best way to go here?
I think to some extent we could do that for starters, Because that will help us, change the mindset of Al-Shabaab and to ensure that the attacks are not as prominent as they are.
Okay, let's look at this the methods of decimating these terror groups now. Would you say perhaps, what would you rather propose as the best option now to decimate terrorist groups that are posing a threat to lives of individuals in different societies now?
My proposal would be, number one, like I said, to look for the funders and look for people who are benefiting from these acts. I think Al-Shabaab and terrorists are just foot soldiers. We have people who are benefiting from terrorism acts. So can we then go to the bottom of it and ask ourselves that pertinent question: who is the greatest beneficiary of terrorism? And we might be surprised to find that maybe those persons are with us. So they are within us. So I think if we look at that, then we are able to fight terrorism without necessarily, chasing after the wind.
Right, now let's quickly wrap up the show now. Onyekachi, what's your option? What's the best option that we can adopt to finally defeat these terrorist groups?
I agree with the other speaker that you need to combat the ideology. But I think that good governance is also required to also combat, because when a man is hungry and without any hope of sustenance, particularly when the effects of climate change and global warming is biting hard in the Sahel region, man in his basest level becomes sometimes reduces himself to an animal. So the issue of survival is key. The issue of unemployment is also key. Access to potable water and basic amenities of life. And if the terrorists are beginning to seem more appealing than normal civil life, then you find there the challenge. So yes, we combat very hard, and we also deal with the soft issues of combating the ideology, but not leaving the man on an empty stomach, at least. So the issue of good governance must come to play.
Like you normally say, an idle man is a devil's
Absolutely.
Workshop. Well, let's wrap up the show. Thank you very much, Onyekachi Adekoya, for your insights on Africa Today, and also my guest on phone, Elias Mutuma. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure.
Thank you so much, and good night.
Now, whether it is Al-Shabaab in Somalia or Boko Haram in Nigeria, the war against terror has shown that no country can be an island of peace and prosperity in an ocean of insecurity. Well, in the wake of terrorism going beyond borders, the fight may not end in the next decade. But turning the tide means that nations must adopt joint strategies and implement effective policies to address acts of terror now and in the nearest future. And that is our package for tonight. But don't forget to join the conversation as usual on Twitter at TVC News NG, and follow me for updates around Africa at Esther TVC News. Until the next one again, I am Esther Omokwariola, and always remember, Africa can only get better.